Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Maria Guadalupe Garcia Darderes, and I'm happy to facilitate the following conference meeting in relation to Patient Safety Day. Thank you to each of you for being here with us today. On behalf of International Society on Pharmacovigilance, we are very pleased to welcome to all of you to be here in the third edition of the ISoP Patient Safety Day event that will be held in two journeys, today, September 7, and tomorrow, September 8. The World Health Organization established a Patient Safety Day to increase public engagement in healthcare safety and promote global adhesion to prevent and reduce avoidable harm in healthcare. This year, the WHO is promoting medication without harm. ISoP reaffirms the objectives to the WHO Global Patient Safety Challenge and calls on the stakeholders and health professionals to prioritize and take early actions in the key areas associated with significant patient harms due to unsafe medication practices. These include high-risk situations, transitions of cares, polypharmacy, look-alike, zone-alike medications, and other serious disruptions in the provision of health services. Starting with our President, Mayor Harrison, will address a few words to all of you. Please listen to her. Thank you for your attention. Now I want you to invite you to show your participation in social media using the following hashtag. Hashtag ISoPOnline PSD 2022, ISoP Medication Safety, ISoP MedAir, ISoP Medication Without Harm, and World Patient Safety Day. I'm publishing our pictures, our ideas about medication without harm topics. Following with the program, let me introduce you with the Professor Marco Tuccori. He is coordinator of the Pharmacovigilance Regional Center of Tuscany at the University Hospital of Pisa. He is currently co-chair of the scientific board in ISoP and leader of the ISoP Italian chapter. The following conference is named the Challenge of Communicating Drug Safety Through Social Media. Welcome together with this presentation.
Okay, hello everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see. So thank you very much for inviting me to provide this presentation today. I'm very happy to contribute to this Patient Safety Day. And I chose this topic because I strongly believe that it may be of great interest for patients and for ensuring the safety of patients throughout the communication of drug safety risk. This is a short conflict of interest and disclaimer slides. And I would like to start to discuss this topic with some definition. First of all, a definition of drug safety communication. What is the scope of drug safety communication? Instead of sharing information about possible drug-related problems, adverse reactions, but also other problems that people have experienced directly or not, to limit or avoid other persons may have similar problems. Drug safety communication can be considered the cornerstone of risk minimization strategies in pharmacovigilance. The study of drug safety communication is particularly complex since it requires expertise in pharmacology, pharmacoepidemiology, social sciences, media sciences, rhetoric, and also ethics. In this graph, you can see what are the main cornerstone, the main key elements of an effective drug safety communication with a credible source. And I would like to remark that credible does not mean expert, an expert source. The communication should be relevant to the practice of physician or to the practice of a care professional, but also to the patients. The communication must be concise, must fit with the workflow, should be timely, and should be easy accessible. About social media, we must remember that it involves a lot of people around the world. It has been estimated in 2022 that more or less 4.95 billion of persons are internet users, and These include more than 4.6 billion social media users, with 58.4% of the world population being involved in communicating through social media. This made social media probably the most important network of communication of the history of mankind, with several premises. It is the easiest access to receive information in the history of mankind, the easiest way to disseminate information in the history of mankind, and also the largest audience in the history of mankind. To understand what are the main challenges that the communication of drug safety through social media deals with, we need to define what are the key elements of communication in general. Usually we have a sender, so the element that produces the information and deliver the information through a media, and a receiver, which is the target population of the message. The message can be written, can be oral, can be graphic, can be visual, can be even a music, whatever can transmit an information can be considered as a message. Usually, the transmission of a message can be translated in something like a modification or not of the behavior of the receiver, of the target population, both in a positive or in a negative way. It depends, of course, on the effectiveness of the communication itself. When we talk about the drug safety communication, it's important to remark that patients are a key element of the communication when social media is the medium we are using, because the patient is also an active producer of the communication, of the information, and also a receiver, a passive receiver of the information itself. But it can work as an amplifier of the information as a general result. Or the communication of the risk of medicinal product uses the social media channel extensively. In particular, a great deal of daily social media discussion is about health and disease information, as well as biomedical and medical products that address this condition. So medicine, devices, vitamins, supplements, etc. We must also consider a broader aspect of drug use, not that is strictly connected with the authorized indication. So the off-label use, the problems with product quality, the formulation, the handling, the disposal, the sensitive or stigmatized topics, for instance, the discussion about events that involve the sexual sphere, and the reluctance to adhere to the treatment may be because of bothersome adverse drug reaction. In this perspective, of course, social media could appear as the most suitable tool to disseminate drug safety information to pursue a risk minimization strategy. Unfortunately, some feature of this media may represent a challenge for drug safety communication indeed. To describe what are the main challenges of communicating drug safety using social media, it is important also to show what are the some important phenomena of communication, of transmission of information through social media, for which we are currently using words that come from epidemiology and infectivology in a way. One of the most suitable examples to discuss this is talking about viral phenomena. Analogous to the way in which virus propagates, the term viral pertains to a video, an image, or a written content spreading to numerous online users with a short time period. This concept has become a common way to describe how talks, information, and trends move into a true human population. But there are also other phenomena that are strictly connected with the viral communication. One of these is distortion, for instance. News and information can be distorted, voluntarily or not, during circulation simply by adding a comment or changing word that can affect the interpretation of the message. It creates misinformation clusters, so cluster of users that are not informed correctly. This cluster can also aggregate around a leader. this is the trustable person we were talking before. A trustable person is not necessarily an expert person. One of the most easier example we can do is that, for instance, of the former President Trump, when he talked about the use of hydroxychloroquine and promoted the use of hydroxychloroquine during the pandemic. The pandemic represented a extremely suitable observatory for discussing about the communication of drug safety and vaccine safety in social media. And so I will use the pandemic as an example in many times during my presentation. So the trusted person can become leader of these clusters of thoughts, and users become followers at the beginning and then supporters. So to get inside the network of a social network, there is the creation of cluster of users that share the same tools and particularly usually follow specific leaders. This can create a sort of communication immunity that is very close to the herd immunity we have talked a lot about during the vaccination campaign, because supporters create a cluster of thought around a leader and become impenetrable to information that are not provided or shared by the leader himself. In these cases, common communication strategies does not work. So we have to rethink to a different strategy to approach the communication with this subject. I would like to make an example to let you understand what a supporter is. The best comparison we can make is that with the supporters of a football team. Because if I am a supporter of a specific football team, it is quite impossible that during my life I can change that team. And this is the same difficulties we have in trying to let these people change their mind, especially when they have negative attitude towards medication or to vaccine. Another important element of discussion is, of course, that of language used by social media to disseminate information about drug safety and vaccine. Of course, social media used a lot of messages, written messages, as the favorite form for disseminating information. But it has been demonstrated that probably graphic information represents the better way for obtaining an effective communication, particularly when drug safety is pushed or correct behavior toward drugs is pushed by whatever the sender of the message. In particular, this graph can help to understand the magnitude of a risk. When you talk about the magnitude of a risk in social media, you have always to try to compare this risk with something that can be easily understood by the receiver of the message, the user of the social media. You know, for instance, even in this case, during the vaccination campaign, you can remember that we had identified a signal of a blood clot of thrombosis in users of the AstraZeneca vaccine. That was a rare event, and the benefit-risk profile, the benefit-risk balance of the use of the vaccine was anyway extremely favorable to the vaccination. But it was not easy to let the user understand that the benefit overcome the risk, because it was not easy to let them understand what is the magnitude of the risk compared to that of not being vaccinated. And therefore, the best way to do this was that of compare the risk of thrombosis or the risk of adverse events. Here in this graph, you can see what was the risk of dying after vaccination, and compare the risk, this risk with the similar risk that are very easily understandable in terms of exposure. So common exposure that are associated with the risk that is likely greater than that of receiving a vaccine. So daily life exposure, common exposure, that can be even socially accepted or even pursued in some situation. For instance, the risk of clots with vaccine can be compared with the risk of clots with oral contraceptive pills, with the risk of clots with smoking, or even with the risk of deep vein thrombosis with long haul flights. Sorry, and traveling is usually appreciated by everyone, and therefore, if you agree of accept the risk of having a deep vein thrombosis with flight, maybe you can accept a lower risk of having a thrombosis, of course, while receiving a vaccine. This is the mental mechanism that you have to try to exploit to let the person understand the magnitude of the problem. So in this graph, you can see what are the differences in terms of number. Particularly here, you have difference described in two different strata of the population based on age. And you can see that the serious harm due to vaccine is compared with the dying with coronavirus, with dying due to an accident or an injury, with dying in a road accident, and also that of being hit by a lightning in a year. So you can see that particularly in certain population, this risk is not very far from that of being hit by a lightning during a year. And here you have the comparison we have described before in terms of number with common exposure of daily light. It is important to show also that these graphic messages are using numbers to let the person understand the magnitude of a risk. But sometimes numbers are not very well understandable by the user of a social network or whatever the media you are using, because number can be somehow seen as a sort of trick, and in some situation they can corroborate, for instance, conspiracy theorists. So a better way to show the numbers for letting the users understand the magnitude of a risk about taking a drug or a vaccine is that of using picture also for describing the magnitude of a problem. And in this way, it is extremely important to report the denominator of the proportion you are trying to show, you are trying to communicate to the target population. In my opinion, for instance, this first representation of a risk is not very well understandable because the denominator is not reported. And honestly, despite I have some knowledge of pharmacoepidemiology or epidemiology, I cannot perfectly understand the message behind this graph. Contrarily, I consider extremely effective this representation, this picture, because it showed the denominator and using also a small denominator that can help the understandability of the magnitude of this picture. It is particularly effective in communicating the magnitude of the risk. You can see here how many patients are vaccinated in an hospital ward for COVID, of course, hospitalized for COVID, of course, and also in an intensive care unit. So you can see what is the great benefit of being vaccinated just in a glance. As I said before, of course, the pandemic represents one of the best observatory that can teach us what are the effects of drug safety communication on the population, particularly in emergency situations that are very peculiar, like the pandemic. You know that the World Health Organization invented the name infodemic to describe the situation in which the pandemic was the focal elements of the communication for several months in the entire globe. And they talk about, and they describe this storm of information, regardless of whether this information were true or even fake, as an infodemic. It can be described as a storm, as an hurricane that can impact on the population, on the coast, on the lands of a nation, like in this example. And the main consequence of this storm is the induction of fear in the population, the creation of a feeling of uncertainty that can lead the population both to hazardous behavior, particular toward drugs, I mean, particularly in the first part of the pandemic and of the infodemic in parallel, and to vaccine hesitancies, particularly in the second wave of the pandemic. Yes, I said wave because we can even identify two different waves of infodemic. The first one deals with the drugs, but in particular, and it was in the first part before the introduction of vaccines for COVID-19, so more or less during all 2020, and deals with the use of drugs that were approved for different indications, but that were believed to have some kind of effect toward the COVID-19, toward the infection. In the second wave, the vaccine were the protagonist of the infodemic, and the problems with the acceptance of vaccination, considering, for instance, the short period of time that this vaccine required for the development, because many persons associate a short period of phase of experimental phase with uncertainty about safety of the vaccination, and therefore can decide not to be vaccinated, or even to wait for a better time for being vaccinated, to wait for more information before choosing of being vaccinated. In 2021, I published this article where I tried to figure out what are the people behavior in response of certain kind of messages that have been communicated during the first part of the pandemic, particularly through social media. There were two kinds of communication in particular. The first one was a message that said that a particular drug has a detrimental effect toward the disease. Of course, this can trigger fear in people normally taking that drug, and these people can be pulled to discontinue their treatment because they are supposed to favor the infection. So, as a consequence, we have a compliance reduction in approved indication with a therapeutic failure. The second situation is the opposite, when the message is that a particular drug has a beneficial effect toward the disease. The main consequences for the behavior of the population are, first, a rush to drug purchase. The consequence of this is the privation of drugs for the approved indication, so we will have again a therapeutic failure, and also an increase in online purchase of this drug, with the possibility of fake drug diffusion. So again, a therapeutic failure. Also, we could have a drug intake without medical supervision, with a wrong product, medication error or poisoning, wrong indication, so misuse, and the use of drugs with inappropriate doses, so an overdose. One of the most important examples we can make, and the most known, the most famous, is that of a man died in the United States because he decided to drink a cleaner that contained hydroxychloroquine sulfate, because he had read on social media that hydroxychloroquine can cure the COVID-19, and so even prevent, because patients cannot distinguish between cure and prevention. And so he decided to drink this cleaner used for fish tank. And he died poisoned by this cleaner, because of course the cleaner does not contain only hydroxychloroquine sulfate, but also other dangerous ingredients. if we try to extend this consideration to the second wave, we can identify other situations that are similar. In some situation, this deal with vaccine, with the attitude of taking vaccine, and in the other, again, with drugs. For instance, in one case, we could have a message that is that vaccines are dangerous. This can lead to the use of alternative treatments, general vaccine hesitancies, of course, but with the use of alternative treatments. So we have wrong product or intervention, so medication errors, poisoning, and self-injury, or even the increase of spontaneous reporting of adverse events following immunization, that in many cases have been demonstrated to be fake or even distorted reports that can come from both newspapers, but also that can be organized by Novax groups, just to try to produce a sabotage of the vaccinate campaign. Another situation is that where the message is that vaccine can cure and not prevent COVID-19. So the patients can decide to wait for being vaccinated up to the infection. They can say, okay, in case I will be infected by COVID-19, then I can be vaccinated. Because, I repeat, they cannot distinguish between the treatment and the prevention. And in this situation, and there are a lot of situations described on a newspaper, they can ask for vaccination when in severe conditions or close to die. We have, again, a situation that deserves discussion, and is that of home treatment for COVID-19, particularly with the use of several antibiotics, for instance, azithromycin, that led to the use of drugs with unproven efficacy to treat mild COVID-19 at home. But this can generate shortage of these drugs, so deprivation again of drugs for the approved indication. And there are also several examples that we can meet with this. About let's go with some example I have collected during the last 2 years about where the situation describing peculiar adverse reaction or peculiar situation dealing with drug safety diffused and disseminated by social media. One of this weird event was this video that virally circulated through social media about that should have supported the belief and the conspiracy about the content of vaccine, because the Novax persons believes that vaccine contains metals, and the demonstration of this should be that after vaccination, several people can try to apply a magnet on the skin, and the magnet remain attached to the skin because of the metal in the blood due to the vaccination. Of course, you have some blurred video of this where you cannot understand whether the video was actually true or not, or was fake, and a situation in which, of course, you don't have the control. So the people have not tried to apply the magnet before being vaccinated to show that the metal was not in the blood before the vaccination. But this induced several people to test this situation after vaccination, and sometimes we received a report. Here we have a report I received in my pharmacovigilance center in Italy of a person that reported this kind of adverse reaction. We can read it together. It happened in a city close to Pisa, Pistoia, in Tuscany. There are dates, there are name and surname of person involved. And she is talking about the mother. To her, subjected to vaccination with the dates, at the so-called cathedral in Pistoia, a magnet remained attached to the skin at the point of vaccination on the same day at 2 p.m., so 3 hours after the vaccination, the moment in which I personally tried this procedure. I would like to inform you that I have already made a statement at the police station, So usually these people go to attorneys or even to police to report this, not to the health authority. And that I personally shot a video of the event, waiting for answers and explanation from the competent authority. I currently greet. Another interesting situation is that of the possibility of using disinfectant orally, for instance, or systemically anyway. Even in this case, unfortunately, again, the past president of the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, supported with a sentence that remained very famous, the use of the disinfectants for treating COVID-19, taken orally, for instance, or by injection. And of course, this is an extremely dangerous procedure, but maybe some patients cannot distinguish this procedure for the danger it represents, for what are the procedures itself. And this article says that President Trump was not the first to produce this information. There are some persons that believe this so much to try to do something very close. For instance, this very famous Austrian leader of a Novax legacy decided to treat himself in a prevention with enema of bleach, and he died because of poisoning following these enemas. And this is an interesting situation in which we can try to consider this person, this leader, a sort of testimonial of what can happen if you follow certain recommendation, unproven, not scientifically confirmed, and so on, that can be read on the social media. We can see another example later. Here we have another Italian example in this kind that made me astonished when I read it on Italian newspaper. This person decided to use tourniquets to block the vaccine entering in the body, and as a consequence, he underwent urgent surgical intervention. Particularly, this is the first tweet made from the doctor that managed this case, talk about a patient who comes to the emergency room with a black arm and humeral occlusion. Questioned, he explained that he got vaccination 2 days ago to be allowed to work. I would like to remember that vaccination in Italy was mandatory for accessing offices and place of work. So he decided to accept the vaccination, but he intended to prevent the vaccine from entering the body, following social media medical advice, kept tourniquets above and below the injection sites. In another tweet, the doctor continues the story and said, now he has a nervous pain in the ulna and he has undergone surgical intervention to reopen the vessel, and he will probably have partial disability for his life. About possible shortage of drugs following the rush to purchase for drugs that are not proven to be effective in the treatment or the prevention of COVID-19 infection. Here I have reported a communication, one of the many communications that the Italian agency made during the entire pandemic about the avoiding of treatments that are not proven for being effective or to have some benefits in the treatment or in the prevention of COVID-19, about the use of azithromycin, because this use was pretty much widespread among Italian prescribers, particularly general practitioners that need to treat somehow the patients at home. And therefore, the national Italian agency tried to modify with this communication that, of course, were shared again with social media, particularly with social media, and on the ICA website, of course, during the pandemic. This is the last example I would like to show you today, and it's close to the example of the enemas with the bleach enema we have described in the previous slides. There's another leader, Novax leader, opinion leader against vaccination that died due to COVID-19 infection during the pandemic. And I would like to comment on this news, because I think that there are several elements that show that the journalists somehow try to be effective in communicating, particularly to the group of people choosing of not being vaccinated because whatever the reason, they decide to be not vaccinated, that likely belong to the inner circle of person like this one. So the protagonist, this message I consider particularly effective because the protagonist is close to the people refusing to receive the vaccine. And this can favor the identification with him by the population that is the main target of the communication produced by this journalist. The title underlines the age of the person, and it identified the subject as a young. And this is because I consider this particularly effective because premature death is a concept that triggers a sort of awareness of fragility and stimulates the search for protection. There are also sentences of suffering and repentance pronounced by the subject that serve as a testimonial for the vaccination. So a Novax leader that serves as a testimonial for the vaccination. And this is particularly effective because he is loved and considered trustable within the audience population to which the message is directed, of course. The sentences are reported by a subject. We have here in the comments a small sentence that says wife speaking. The sentence is reported by a subject who certainly guarantees for the patient's interest and is not manipulable by external subject who would have an interest in discrediting the Novax idea. Even in this situation, the patient implored nurses to vaccinate him before dying. And this demonstrates again that patients sometimes cannot understand the difference between cure and prevention. And therefore, it is extremely important to remark this when we talk about vaccination and the safety of vaccination in social media or whatever the channel or whatever the communication about drug safety and vaccine safety we are creating, we are issuing. So in conclusion, social media represent an effective tool for the delivery of drug safety information. But unfortunately, this is true not only for information that support the risk minimization programs, but also for information going in the opposite direction or information that can jeopardize the safe use of medication. In the process of disseminating information on the safety of drugs and understanding their meaning, the patient plays a key role which has increased enormously with the use of social media. The patient is no longer a passive receiver of the information, but also an active element of the communication with both positive and detrimental effect on the communication itself. It is important that drug and vaccine risk communication stakeholders are aware of the patient's role in this process and prepared to optimize it in the best possible way. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tuccori, for these very important topics to discuss with us in this third edition in our ISoP patient safety. Previous years, we have more than 30,000 people joining us in these synchronic and recorded seasons, so we have to continue with this successful promotion of medication safety every year. We invite all the audience to put their questions in our chat, or in addition, we have our webpage www.isoponline.org. our team. So in regard of this, I have two questions for you, Dr. Tuccori. So if you are so nice to answer this, just to talk about infodemiology, a new type of mode to start talking about all this big data and how we can handle this, and how do you work with others with this?
Well, I think that real-world evidence data cannot be very supportive in this case because, as I said during my presentation, for understanding the importance of such kind of data and the results of such kind of studies in support of the safety of drugs and the safety of vaccine, it is often required a specific skill that comes from the experience, or even several years of experience in discussing this topic. I think that we need to try to provide a sort of interpretation of this data that can be easily understandable by the general public, particularly by the use of graphic communication, as I have shown during my presentation. I think that this data can be used in that way, but maybe we are not using them for what they are, what there is the potential of their importance at the moment. We should implement the use of this data and the adaptation of the communication for the general public when using this data.
Right. Thank you so much. And the last question, if you can, you talk about the magnitude of the risk. And what do you think that about patients or caregivers or other people understand and can handle this? And in addition, in regards to one of your last slides, you mentioned about care and prevention. So how we can promote the difference in between with the patients? Mm. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Of course, I will try to answer to both questions in one reply only. Of course, the understanding of the magnitude is something not very easy because of several limitations that even maybe the channel of social media offer to persons that intended to communicate drug safety to social media. But anyway, the problem is that the understanding of the magnitude deals with the risk perception, which is extremely individual for the person, and therefore you should try to retail specific approach for individual patients. This is why the first receiver of such kind of communication should be the caregiver. When the caregiver have understood the magnitude of the problem, and I think that it is quite easier to let them understand the magnitude of the problem, they can support you in transmitting the same information to the patients. And they are facilitated in obtaining an improvement of the behavior of the patient because there is a direct knowledge of the patients and they know how to approach the patients and how to create the communication with the specific patient. So it is extremely important that caregivers can retain this kind of communication to the patient's characteristics. No? There are even guidelines describing a specific approach where you have to sit in front of the patient and explaining, okay, I can say to you what I know about the magnitude of the risk, then you can tell the same to me, and we will try to discuss together what is better for you in the current situation. So you can consider also, for instance, again, the example of the pandemic is the most suitable. You can even consider, for instance, what is the current level of the disease in your country. You can discuss what is the severity of the disease, what is the our capability of taking care of patients once they are in the hospital. So what are the therapeutic tools we have? So you can decide better with a with the relevant information at your disposal. What is better for you? This is the best way for me to transmit to patient the magnitude of the risk. About your second question, can you repeat me what was the second question?
Sure. How we can promote the difference between the cure and prevention? No,
because I think that yeah, exactly. I think that this concept is not stressed too much when we talk about drug safety, and this is not only a problem. Mainly, it's not a problem of regulatory authority because they are currently doing very well, but it is more a problem of the amplification of the information that is usually given by the journalist and by online and newspaper. So the situation is that the journalists had the need of simplifying the information provided by the health authority for the majority of the population receiving the message online. So we should probably work with journalists stressing, remarking as much as possible the difference between cure and treatment, between prevention and treatment when we talk about whatever the therapeutic tool we have against COVID-19 in this particular situation. But the confusion can be relevant because, of course, the risk is that the patient that is perfectly healthy can try to prevent COVID-19 by taking a medicine for which there is only the risk, because if you are not ill, there is no need or no benefit for you to take the medicine, and you are only risking instead of avoiding the disease and the infection. So I think that we should work a lot with, particularly with journalists and with those working on the amplification of the news, of the information, particularly on social media.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Tuccori, for your presentation and answer all these questions. It was a great conversation to all of us, and thank you on behalf of all the organizations of the Patient Safety Day 2022. We thank you for valuable participation in this important event, and we invite the rest of the audience to get online and participate to the other meetings. Thank you.